Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the Arizona Cardinals site from the USA Today, NFL Wire. And Seth Cox is with me as always, almost always is with me on this show, coming from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, the Arizona Cardinals site from SB Nation, and also one of the hosts of the original Draft Breakdown podcast. Seth, how fun is it right now? I mean, we have been doing shows since 2013. We're on episode 332, 332 that is, and you've been on almost all of them. There's been a few preview shows you haven't been on or preview things, but is there really anything better than to have a podcast about a team that's doing pretty much everything right this year?
No, I mean, we've had two of these seasons, 2014 and 2015, where we got to enjoy it, and then there were some issues that came aboard, and 2015 it just came to an abrupt end. But yeah,
as opposed to 2014, which was the slow death.
Yeah, 2014 was the miserable one, and 2015 was the quick and painless one. It's so much fun to enjoy the ride, though. That's what we as fans need to take from this. Like, there's definitely going to be times and things that come up over the next 2 months, because we're assuming they're going to make the playoffs at this point, that could change things. But for the most part, it's going to be enjoyable to watch this play out and how they end up and where they end up and all of that, because, as Cardinals fans, we don't get to do this very often.
It's fantastic. And the Cardinals are winners again. A 31-17 victory over the San Francisco 49ers on the road. But it wasn't just any win. They blew out the 49ers with a bunch of backups. That included Colt McCoy as the starting quarterback, losing Chase Edmonds after one play. They didn't have Kyler Murray. They didn't have DeAndre Hopkins. They didn't have A.J. Green. So we're talking about a receiving core of Christian Kirk, Rondale Moore, and Antoine Wesley. They lost Justin Pugh in the first half. They lost Max Garcia. They don't have J.J. Watt. This is a team that continues to roll. They are 8-1. They've won as many games as they did last season. Let's start things off. So in this show, what we're going to cover, we're going to talk about our standouts and takeaways from the game. We're going to talk about the playing rotations, because there were a couple of starters on the team on Sunday. We'll discuss just exactly how significant the win is as we look at the big picture of the season. And there's a ton of injuries going on, so we're going to discuss the injuries and look ahead to the Carolina-Panthers. They return home week 10 to take on the Carolina Panthers, where we get the homecoming, the revenge season of Hassan Reddick, but doesn't look like it's going to look like a different Carolina squad than what we expected to see earlier in the season. So let's go ahead and get started. Cardinals 31, 49ers 17. What were your biggest takeaways out of that victory?
I think there were a couple. I think the first thing that you took away is that this is a complete team, and it's something that we've talked about, and we talked about in the loss to the Packers, and we've talked about in a lot of the wins, is that when this team plays a complete game, they're unbeatable. But they're good enough to have one side of the ball or even two sides of the ball struggle like they did in the Packers game and still have a chance to win. And that's what's fun is, I mean, you're talking about literally the top two wide receivers and your quarterback being gone. your number one running back and your starting left guard all basically not playing at all. I mean, I know Pugh played 17 snaps, 19 snaps,
I think
something
it was
like
only
that.
9.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, I mean, a very few amount of snaps, and it didn't matter. I mean, that wasn't even a close game. It wasn't even an interesting game in terms of, watching from a overall NFL fan perspective. It was an interesting game for Cardinals fans because you're like, wait, is this actually happening? Like, are they literally beating down the San Francisco 49ers in San Francisco with Colt McCoy at quarterback, with Christian Kirk and Antoine Wesley? And I mean, I tweeted about it in the game. The start of the game was a little auspicious. You and I would both agree with that. Like, why did Colt McCoy throw the ball to Darrell Daniels, on two of his
It
first?
didn't make any sense. It didn't
And,
make sense at all.
but then they come out, and it kind of reminded me of last year's game in San Francisco, where, if you remember, the Cardinals on offense, and this was the first game of the season, the Cardinals on offense didn't do anything. Now this was a lot quicker, obviously, but and then on defense, you were like, oh no, because they were just giving up yardage to George Kittle at will. Like, Kittle was back. He had 31 yards or 19 yards on the first drive, and then takes a pass and is just running free. And you're like, oh, here we go. And then Byron Murphy makes a spectacular play, punches the ball out. Jordan Hicks recovers, and then they go down and score. And it's like, oh, okay. Like, that's all they needed. And from there, it was just, I mean, academic. And so from that, when your takeaway is, man, this is a really good football team.
It really is, and that's the thing, is that when they're just doing things well. You talk about what the game plan, like keys to victory. They're doing it almost every week. There's been 2 games where they turned so Packers, Vikings. 2 games where turnovers were a problem, and where they struggled to stop the running game, and the struggle to stop the running game has really been mitigated by the fact that they're getting leads, and that's what happened again. Early points and turnovers. They're taking the ball away and they're scoring, and that puts teams on their heels. And something that take away from this, and maybe this is more appropriate for the significance, is hey, the 49ers got healthy. Now, yes, they were down a couple of players. D Ford went to IR. They lost Javon Kinlaw. But you look at...
But that offense, I mean, all we heard...
They got George Kittle back. They got Deebo Samuel. He was healthy. They got Jeff Wilson back. And they've got Jimmy Garoppolo. So, by and large, this was the team that people believed were a favorite in terms of betting, were a favorite in the NFC West. There was basically the Rams and the 49ers were neck and neck in terms of, and the Cardinals completely dismantled them.
It was
fantastic.
But this week, I mean, we saw the line move from, it opened at 3 points, and by the time the game kicked off, it was the 49ers were 2.5 point favorites. And you go back and you look at a lot of the experts, and the experts really didn't see the Cardinals winning this game.
No,
because they were thinking, oh, the Cardinals are coming back to earth. The Cardinals are not that good.
Said no JJ Watt, no Kyler Murray, no DeAndre Hopkins, and that's where, because the insider, that Cardinals never gave any hints, but insiders in the gambling industry did basically. That's why the line moved so much, because the buzz was there's no way either Murray or Hopkins are playing, and they didn't.
And the 49ers got all of those offensive weapons back, and everybody's thinking to themselves, oh, well, this is, back at home, they're coming off a dominant performance against a feisty Bears team. I mean, the Bears record's not good, but they play good defense. They're a feisty team, and I believe that game was in Chicago, and they just kind of went all over them, right? And so that was the expectation, is that, well, you're getting George Kittle back, you're getting Jeff Wilson back, you've already got all of these other situations, and it's going to be, I mean, it's going to be one of those situations that it's going to be a walk through for the 49ers, and it was anything but that. And I just think it's one of those situations where we as Cardinals fans have talked about it quite a bit, and then we expect it from the media, especially the national media. The Cardinals are historically a terrible team, a terrible franchise. They're not going to get the benefit of the doubt until they put together a run, whether it's this season or, you know, over the next several seasons, to have that benefit of the doubt, to get the look that you know, San Francisco or Seattle or those teams get. And you know, it's unfortunate, but it's one of those things that you earn over time, and I think this win will do quite a bit, and we already are seeing it with the line in the Panthers game, right? Like, the Panthers come in as 10-point underdogs. They're 5-4, or are they 4-5? Anyways,
they're 4-5. They lost 5 of their last 6 games, and I think that's part of it.
It is, but I mean, they have a better record than the San Francisco 49ers.
Yep, they do. Yes, they do. So look at this. So standouts. The thing is that the Cardinals didn't miss a beat. We really didn't know what to expect from Colt McCoy, considering it was his first real action in forever, and it's his first time in this system. It was truly impressive to see how well he handled the offense. Timing was there. I mean, he had the first drive was obviously not great, but as we've seen even with Kyler Murray, and it kind of shows, you know, if you're a smart quarterback, you can, like in this offense, you can thrive. They were really good about getting the ball out quickly, so they used the short game, they used the dump offs, and still they managed to have some downfield plays. His arm looked good. It felt like he was like a Drew Stanton plus. You know, obviously Drew Stanton was very, very solid as a backup for the Cardinals and won them several games. But for most of those games, Stanton was shaky and inaccurate a little bit.
I was going to say,
McCoy
was usually like
was great.
It was usually like a sub 50, maybe slightly over 50% completions, you know, for 145 yards, but he would end up with like 2 or 3 touchdowns and an interception. And then you had kind of the opposite, right? Like highly efficient, 22 of 26, 200 plus yards, only the 1 touchdown. I mean, not a bad thing, but it was easy throws, catches, runs that they expected for this team, and that they got what they needed.
I don't know that it's really been since Drew Stanton. We haven't had the feel where you have the trust now. And I think going into the game it was like, well, people kind of thought that Colt McCoy is going to be okay, but let's be honest, we hadn't really seen Colt McCoy do much in the NFL in years. And even so, like when he started for the Giants, it's not like he put up good numbers. When he started his 2 games, he had 1 touchdown and 1 interception in his 2 starts, and he was sacked 5 times. There was not a single special or even nice thing. He's gotten spot starts. Now, granted, he was gonna be, had he not gotten hurt in that last bowl game, he would have been one of the more highly touted rookie quarterbacks coming in the NFL, but playing on he was an okay quarterback on a terrible Browns team, and that's really from there he became a career backup. But he still talks and prepares, and in terms of arm talent, I don't know if I felt this confident about. I can say this. I haven't felt this confident about a backup since Drew Stanton, and that was after we had Drew Stanton doing it for many games, because in 2014 when he had to start for Carson Palmer, everyone like, I don't know, but then he just proved over and over and over again that he could get the job done. Didn't feel that with Chris Streveler, and I don't think we felt that with Brett Hundley. Definitely didn't feel that in 2018, and I think it really is what a great signing, and just the contributions. Look at the contributions that the Cardinals got from Colt McCoy, who's basically on a minimum contract. James Conner, $1.25 million. Marcus, I still to this day, how in the world was Marcus Golden willing to sign with the Cardinals on a 2-year, $5 million deal? He's got 9 sacks. He's second in the league in sacks right now. And, you talk about, we could have had Hassan Reddick. Hassan Reddick's making almost between $6 and $8 million this year.
Yeah.
Marcus Golden's got more sacks than he does. He's a guy who's got a better track record of sacks, and he's doing it this year some more. Just the value that the Cardinals are getting out of these players that they signed for almost nothing is really just incredible right now.
Well, and you look at it too. You had Christian Kirk really step up and make plays. That was quite impressive for the Cardinals when we knew they were undermanned, especially at the wide receiver position. I mean, this is a conversation we've had ad nauseum on this podcast is, who is Christian Kirk? What is he on this team? And he comes in and 6 receptions for 91 yards. James Conner, 5 for 77. Antoine Wesley, 3 for 62. I mean, those are phenomenal numbers. And then a guy that, Arizona fans love because he went to ASU, Benjamin steps in, 9 carries, 39 yards, and one of the best touchdown runs we've seen in a long, long time.
That run, there were standouts from so many, and that's why Cliff Kingsbury gave out 6 game balls after the game. That's not typical. Colt got one, Eno got one, James Conner got one, Jordan Hicks got one, Chandler Jones got one. That record-setting sack, franchise record-setting sack. Marcus Golden had 3 sacks. It was something to be impressed about.
And you do look at it. Jordan Phillips, back had a sack, a tackle for a loss, and 2 hits on the quarterback. I mean, that's a fantastic game. I mean,
Zach Allen, he didn't put up big numbers, but like JJ, he was playing the JJ Watt role and kind of doing it well, and he did it. Yeah. He was disruptive. He was causing problems. He was fantastic.
Yeah, he had a tackle for a loss. He was commanding double teams and allowing guys to make plays, and that's what people don't get is, if you double team Allen and Jones, that means Phillips and Golden have to win their one-on-one matchups, right? They're doing that, and that's a key to the success of this team, and why you can talk about 15, 20 guys every game, because they're all stepping up. I mean, we didn't even mention Sean Harlow, who stepped in, played fantastic for Justin Pugh when he got injured.
Another guy who really came out of nowhere because he played 1 game before in the NFL before this year.
Yeah.
He's honestly, I'm starting to get the feel that maybe it's Sean Kugler. It's got to be Sean Kugler, because when they pick up guys off the scrap heap, nobody had heard of Justin Murray. Nobody had heard about Sean Harlow, and there have been solid contributors, even starters for them, and have done a really good job. Max Garcia, he'd been a starter, but after the ACL tear, he's been on a 1-year deal ever since he joined the Cardinals in 2019, and he's when he's in the lineup, he's playing at a starter level. He's not struggling. It's been great.
Right, he's playing extremely well, giving the Cardinals solid reps and giving them a guy that can, be versatile inside and out. And that's one of the things that this team has needed consistently was a Justin Murray, and they've got that. And then we talk, you just mentioned Max Garcia. These guys are pros, and what I mean by that is you fill in. We've talked a lot about like who was the guy, goodness, the name's escaping me, J.R. Sweezy's, who was the guy in the BA era that was kind of, like Sweezy.
They brought in Evan Mathis one time.
Yeah. And they just continue to bring in guys past their primes and not bring in guys that are maybe not as, or weren't as talented, but now know how to play and are able to give you better production. And those are things that
Adam Snyder.
Yeah. And so when you look at those things, you look at guys that, like Garcia, like Harlow, that have talent that just need an opportunity and like you said, the coaching and that's, one of the things that we have to give this entire staff a little bit more credit for. And that's, they've done a really nice job of developing players. I know that we'd like to see more from the rookies, but I mean, honestly, you look at it, they're getting, or the draft picks, but they're getting production from a lot of places. And we didn't even mention Marco Wilson, who's playing,
well, especially he's playing. He's not bad. I mean, he hasn't been fantastic for a few games, but he's we've seen rookie cornerbacks out there, and they make mistakes. Marco's not making mistakes. He's not standing out as a great player, but as a rookie, he's not making mistakes.
And they just have, a lot of they just have a lot of guys that are contributing in strong ways. And what that does is it allows you to miss games with your stars. This is a star-driven league at the end of the day. But you need those role players. And you can look back last year for Tampa Bay, and it was their role players were just outplayed Kansas City's role players, right? Because I mean, Kansas City had probably the two best players in the game, maybe the three best players in the game, but Tampa Bay had them at 19 other positions, and that that's what makes the difference. And I feel like that's what you're getting from the Cardinals right now more than we've seen in the past. And that's what makes them so talented. And this is, really reminiscent of that 2014 team that you and I have talked quite a bit about, that they could be the team that maybe goes to the Super Bowl. Maybe they don't win, but, goes to the Super Bowl and gives that Cardinals a chance. And this team has that same type of feeling. Now, the difference is, Tom Brady's in the NFC instead of the AFC. So
yeah, I've said since things are going well, things are going right. Even the adversities, things are still going right. They're getting contributes to the right spot. We felt like this was a team with a Super Bowl ceiling. Only the weird thing is that we're actually seeing them play at their ceiling. Coming on to the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Let's talk about some of the playing rotations, because there were a couple of surprises that we saw in the game. So that's coming on next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. And, it's a minor thing, but there were a couple of surprises in the starting lineup and in the playing rotations. And I think we're going to point to two particular positions. One was at right guard. Josh Jones has been the starter all season. except when he was starting at right tackle for Kelvin Beachum. And instead, in the starting lineup was Max Garcia. On the other end, on the defensive side of the ball, Zaven Collins only played 3 snaps the whole game. Tanner Vallejo was getting the snaps. So it was Hicks and Isaiah Simmons and Tanner Vallejo in those base packages, where that's kind of how they handled things. And that's how surprised were you to see that? I've got a theory on Collins, but the Jones one I was actually interesting.
Yeah, I was surprised by the Jones situation as well. Just because he had played well with Rodney Hudson, then obviously they had to move him outside. They started Justin Murray, right, at the right guard when Beachum was out, and
had kicked Jones out to right
Jones
tackle.
to right tackle. Right?
And there was that one game that Murray got hurt almost immediately.
Yeah, and then did they bring in Garcia in that game?
Yes, Garcia ended up playing right guard in that game.
Yeah, and so it's interesting because Jones had struggled noticeably the last 2 or 3 games. And you and I have talked about this. I still feel like this is why we're a little surprised. We understood that not playing next to Rodney Hudson was probably hard for Jones, because Hudson, makes a lot of calls and allows him to do some things. So it wasn't surprising. It was more surprising that they didn't put him back out there with Hudson returning this week. But obviously they like what they've seen from Garcia in his limited snaps and wanted to give him a look. And it's just, unfortunate that he's a big man dealing with leg injuries, because we know that's something that can be very difficult to overcome.
Yeah, the Achilles injury kind of creeped up on him again, and so he ended up, after the first half, not coming back out and playing, and it was Josh Jones to finish the game. When I saw, I figured it was partly because of Jones' struggles, although, it felt like they were willing to play through his growing pains. But when I saw initially that Garcia was in the lineup, I was saying, oh, we can expect a lot of running, because if there's one thing that Garcia is, he's big and strong. Josh Jones is very athletic. He is not the same level of big and strong as Max Garcia. And Garcia, that's why they moved him to center, because he is similar in build and strength to Hudson, which makes it kind of a consistent transition, whether you have Hudson in there or Garcia in there at center. And I thought, oh, okay, this is because you've got McCoy back there. You don't quite, so you need someone perhaps a little more reliable, keeping a guy in front, someone who's stronger, giving that room up front. But honestly, it might have just been performance related, with Jones struggling, and the fact that they had seen Garcia play very well, probably felt that in his time in the lineup at center and at guard in the games that he's played, that he deserved to keep playing, because Sean Kugler, offensive line coach, run game coordinator, has been consistent in saying that we're going to put the best 5 guys out there. And I'm guessing that heading into San Francisco, headed to Santa Clara when they play the 49ers, that they felt that Garcia at right guard was one of their top 5.
Right. And that's the thing is, we've talked about this. Health along the offensive line is nearly impossible to see. I think, I can't remember which game I was watching, and I know the Cardinals haven't had their, starting 5 since week 1 or 2 when Beachum went out, but it's one of those situations where you rarely see this projected and expected start. And maybe it was the San Francisco starting 5. Maybe San Francisco hasn't had their projected starting 5 along the offensive line at all this season, but it's the game of attrition and what we talked about earlier. Guys who step up, maybe they're not standouts, maybe they're not great players. Maybe, I mean, hell, maybe they're not even good players, but they fill in well. They know their assignments and they do their job. And those situations are basically impossible to win if you're not getting those contributions. Now, there does become a limit, obviously, and the Cardinals, as good as they have been at filling those gaps, they're approaching that limit. Let's be completely honest. Part of the reason they lost the Green Bay game was because they kind of reached that limit where Jones was struggling and Harlow was getting his first start of his career, and those situations kind of played out. If you're without Pugh, uh, and you're starting Jones or maybe Justin Murray, who was activated, if you're starting those guys, you really can't afford another one, because it just gets to the point, even with depth, that it's really hard to overcome. And that's something we saw with the Arizona Cardinals secondary, last year, right? Like it just
On the
becomes
defensive line last year was
yeah.
atrocious.
And so those injuries become really hard to overcome.
And the other one was Zaven Collins, with Tanner Vallejo in there. And I have a theory. I don't know. It's kind of odd because based on what we've seen is that mostly when Collins seems to be in the game, he's making plays. Now, I can't remember if it was Vance or if it was Cliff that when asked about him, they're saying he's making some plays and he's making some rookie plays. So my theory is, especially since Collins had been dealing with a lingering shoulder injury that he had re-aggravated. Now, granted, he had no game designation. He practiced fully on Friday last week. But I think with the combination of his missing reps in practice with the shoulder injury, combined with a San Francisco offense where Kyle Shanahan, his motion and misdirection, it is kind of the ingredients to that offense are about changing the linebacker's eyes. And the players most susceptible to that is someone like a Zaven Collins, young player, hasn't seen a lot of looks. And so Vallejo, who's been in the league for a while, so the combined limited reps because of the injury and the fact that Vallejo is probably the more reliable player mentally, I think in this particular case they leaned on the veteran. But still, I just find it weird that, and this is the second year in a row. Now, Isaiah Simmons, it made perfect sense, and they had a plan the whole time. But they said, Zaven Collins, week 1 starter. He's listed as the starter in the depth chart still. They told Jordan Hicks he couldn't compete for the starting job. All of this happens, and then this last week, Zaven Collins barely plays. What did you think of that?
Yeah, I think that's a really accurate and astute way to put it. Linebackers against the 49ers, and we saw Isaiah Simmons get hooked after 3 plays last season in his first game.
Yes, he did.
They get quick hooks against the 49ers. And so if you're going to play multiple linebackers, you're going to probably play guys that you trust and that trust their eyes a little more. Much to the chagrin of fans when it comes to rookie playing time, let's be honest. But overall, the coaches and Vance Joseph has put them in position to be successful. And that's one of those situations where if you put them in those positions, you want to see how they play. And I think Vance was just much more comfortable putting a guy like Tanner Vallejo, who's been in the situation that's seen this, 49ers offense for 3 to 4 of the last seasons, that he knows what he's getting out of it. And he knows what Vallejo has seen and what he can do. And those situations, again, it's more of the fans going, why isn't this first round pick playing over Tanner Vallejo? And it's like, well, let's be honest, they made the right call. I mean, the results speak for themselves. Maybe Zaven plays as well as Tanner did, because Tanner missed 3 or 4 tackles. I mean, he made fantastic reads and then missed a tackle. Now, just his read and getting hands on Elijah Mitchell allowed for gains to be 5-6 yards instead of 20 plus yards. That being said, I don't think you can complain about the outcome, but we do know that fans like to see rookies play.
It's true. And then there's just the one. It wasn't about playing rotation. It was about strategy, because it seemed like every time George Kittle was making a play, Jordan Hicks was in on it, and I know that it feels like, dude, you drafted Isaiah Simmons to cover George Kittle. You might want to have him cover it. And I know that he did cover. I know Simmons did cover on more than one occasion, and a couple of times Simmons got beat, which happens when you got a guy like Kittle. But then at the end of the game, you see hit on a critical down, Isaiah Simmons covering George Kittle. He breaks up the pass. But again, it's not like they could have, because Simmons is not a lockdown cornerback where you could just say, "Okay, guard that guy." Within the scheme of the defense, you have him. They have him playing a number of roles, including off the edge, which we don't love. But the results defensively are good as a team. So there's
that. I think I read Aaron Schatz, and I'll shout him out this week because I gave him crap last week, I believe it was, or 2 weeks ago. That mentioned that the Cardinals DVOA is tops across the board, but there's
very little variation,
and that's what it. Yeah, they're playing consistently well. When was the last time we could say that?
Geez.
And this goes back to our conversation to start. Consistently well at all 3 levels. Like, that's just not something you see from a lot of teams. Like, usually teams have great offenses or great defenses. They don't have everything. So,
and the Cardinals are playing that. It's really crazy to say that, but the Cardinals, you could talk about the Bills too, but in terms of a unit where they have a deadly offense and a lockdown defense, is that the Cardinals have that. They have both ends. It doesn't always feel like it's sustainable, but look through 9 games, and it's been pretty dang sustainable, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, sustainable is putting it lightly, I think. Like, they've played at a super high level, and they're doing it despite massive injury and COVID issues throughout the season.
Let's move on for that. Coming next on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Let's move on and talk about, what does this win mean? Because, it's, other than just being 1-0 on another week, there is some significance to this. We'll talk about that coming next on Rise of C-Red. We're back on the Rise of C-Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. You've heard me, Seth. People have been listening to the show for a while. If there's one thing that this win does that's significant, it is 2 parts. 1, they've completed a season sweep over one of their NFC West opponents, and 2, that gives them their 3rd division win. We talked about before this season kind of what we were looking at, and I've been saying, I think every year that we've been on the podcast and talking about looking forward when we make our predictions, and I say that if you're going to be a wild card team, at least, you must win 3 games in the division because of tiebreakers getting in the way. And now the Cardinals are not just have their 3 wins, they're 3-0, and they've already essentially they've eliminated the San Francisco 49ers from division contention, because now they hold the season sweep over them. They've beaten the Rams. Now, if they go into Seattle in 2 weeks and they beat them, that definitely puts them in the driver's seats because it guarantees that not a single team in the division will hold a head-to-head tiebreak over them, and it will be very difficult for one of those teams to outdo a minimum 4-2 division record. And so I think number one, in terms of significance for the season, that third division win was, I think, is dang near a game changer. And I think, they're 8-1, so they should be a lock for playoffs, but they're a lock for playoffs now. There is no doubt in my mind that they are a playoff team now. That win, of all the other wins, getting them to 3 division wins, puts them in a place where, yes, they will be in the playoffs. They should be. They're 8-1. They're the number one team in the conference. So yes, but the number one seed in the conference is fleeting. We saw it in a blink of an eye last week happen, and now they're back on top. Other than that, what other significance did you see in the win in terms of their makeup, their outlook for the season, bigger picture? What do you think?
I think the big thing is, to your point, is that they control the division. I mean, 3-0 in the division, a sweep of San Francisco. They basically, I mean, it's not official, but they basically eliminated San Francisco from division contention, because even if they go 500 now, and it's tough to say that, but even if they go 5-4 now, they're a 13 and or sorry, a 12 and no, that would be 13-5 team. That's not right. What
12 and 5. 12 and 5.
12 and 5.
If they won out.
Yeah. So 12-5 team. The Cardinals just have to win 4 more games to get to 12 wins. Now, that's not to say that they're going to just roll through and win 4 more games without anything of it, but being at 8-1 makes it really difficult to get caught by a team that's already got 5 losses on the season, right? Like,
yeah.
And in that case too, now Seattle, is not quite as bad, but they do, and they may be getting Russell Wilson back this week. We don't know for sure, but his doctor, I believe, cleared him, which, that's important, because one of the things we've talked about is one of the things that we've talked about quite a bit is that the Cardinals needed to get out in front of these teams and take advantage where they could, and getting out in front while Seattle is hurting and they don't have Russell Wilson, that's a massive thing, because we know how good Russell Wilson is, right? We've seen all too many times how Russell Wilson keeps Seattle in games. And yeah, Seattle's 3-5 as well. I wasn't positive, but yeah, Seattle's 3-5 as well. Now, again, you can't just say, okay, the Cardinals have eliminated those 2 teams, because fluky things happen, but they put themselves in a position without having played Seattle where they're so far ahead of Seattle that it could end up being they're a non-issue, right?
Yeah.
So now all that is left is LA. Now, LA's only lost 1 game or 2 games.
So but that's the thing, is that the Cardinals, with the win, they got help this week because the Cowboys lost, the Rams lost, and the Packers lost. And so they went from being tied at the top but not at the top. Now they are the best. They have the best record. And so Green Bay's the Rams are now a full game behind in the standings, and then the Cardinals also hold the tiebreaker, and so they have a full 2-game lead over for all intents and purposes, over the Rams in the division, and they have a 1-game lead over Green Bay. And so they are now, by getting that win, they control the entire conference right now.
Yeah, and that's the big thing. I mean, and the thing is, coming up next week, LA plays at San Francisco. I think they've lost. I think I saw the last 4 against San Francisco. So and San Francisco is going to be desperate 3-5 team at home, coming off what is, I mean, you look at
That is correct. The Niners have won the
Wire,
last 4.
yeah, and you look at Niners Wire, and you look at Niners Nation, and what was kind of the headlines on those sites? Embarrassing, right? Like lackluster. The Niners are at a crossroads at this point, and so that was the other thing that win does for the Cardinals, is that puts the Niners basically in desperation mode against a Rams team that, yeah, they'll probably be desperate too, but you're at home, talking about the 49ers on Monday Night Football. You can't come out and lay another egg,
And they haven't
right?
won in Levi's Stadium this year, and I think it's been over a year since they've won in that stadium.
Yeah, so I mean, again, this isn't to say that it's a lock, that everything's, but man, isn't that super important that all of this kind of gets to the head of the Cardinals could theoretically go into the bye 3 games up in the division if San Francisco can take care of LA this week to the next closest team. Like that's a baffling thing to think about. 3 games, you come out of the bye with 6 games to go, and you got a 3-game lead in the division, which was supposed to be. And now, granted, obviously, the division's not as good as you were expecting, but you're still winning what was considered the best division in the NFL.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just, I know we're putting things that, should they beat the Panthers this week? Yes, they should. Can they beat the Seahawks in Seattle? Yes, they can. So 10-1 is not too crazy. 10-1 is not crazy.
And even if you go in at 9-2, let's say let's say they handle business against Carolina, and then it's week 2 of Russell Wilson back, and again Seattle desperate, they win a game, they sneak a game in, and win a game against the Cardinals. 9-2. And let's say the Rams lose one of their games, or their game to the 49ers, they're at 7-3, or even at 8-3, and the Cardinals are 9-2. Cardinals still have a 2-game lead on them in the division. Like, I don't think we can understate how important that is moving forward.
Absolutely. Coming on next on the Rise of C-Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. Let's now talk about their injury situation. There's a lot of injuries to work through, and we've got some information about roster moves, so we can talk about what they need, what they should do, what they think they're going to do. That's coming on next on Rise of C-Red. We're back on the Rise of C-Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. The Cardinals have a bunch of injuries. I'll kind of go down the laundry list. So, Kyler Murray with the ankle injury missed the game. DeAndre Hopkins with the hamstring injury missed the game. Chase Edmonds came out of one play, high ankle sprain, expected to miss multiple games. AJ Green still on the COVID list. Justin Pugh left the game with a calf injury. Max Garcia left the game with an Achilles injury. Aaron Brewer, long snapper, left the game with some sort of injury. We think it's a hand. He's expected to miss time. That's less than J.J. Watt's on injured reserve. So we've got, Rashard Lawrence is on injured reserve. And so we're kind of looking at, this is kind of a shell of the team we were expecting. Let's start with Kyler Murray. We don't know anything, but I'm seeing some places where,
I was going to say, Colt McCoy expects him to play.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Colt expects him to play, but I'm starting to hear people that the Cardinals should just rest him till the bye. And this is my take on Kyler Murray. If Kyler Murray can play, like if he's going to be out there and it's one thing if he's severely limited. Because of how we saw Colt McCoy play, I think you're in a situation where, hey, it's okay. If Kyler is going to be greatly limited in what he can do, all right, Colt McCoy. But if Kyler Murray can play, there is zero reason to rest him just to rest him. He is a franchise quarterback. You play him.
Right.
Unless he's at risk at further injuring it, because like they say you save him for this game so that he's available the next game, and you end up sacrificing a game. Like they had the 49ers won that game because he might have been able to play. There's no guarantee he's going to be healthy later in the year anyway, so you don't. It's my opinion, you play guys who can play until they can't play. Obviously, they're going to be smart with him, but that's a medical decision, and I'm not going to hold him out. I absolutely, you don't hold him out unless he's severely limited to where he's not going to play at the same level he could play, and you get a performance like Colt McCoy. It's absolutely don't. You're not going to rest him to rest. If you want to rest him in week 18 when you've already locked up the division of the conference. You've got the number 1 seed. Then you can rest him in week 18 or give him a preseason reps, play a series or two so he's not rusty. Then he comes out. That's when you rest him, when there isn't anything on the line.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've said all along, if Kyler can go, he goes. 85% or higher, you got to let him go. Because that's the thing is everybody wants. He's got to be 100%. Which players are 100% right now? Come on, man.
Not a single play. Colt McCoy, maybe Colt McCoy was until he played.
I was gonna say until he played on Sunday, and then he wasn't. So, I mean, you just, again, to your point, like if there's at all a concern, or he comes out in warm-ups and doesn't look good, no reason. I mean, no reason whatsoever to risk it. But if he comes out, he looks good, he's moving, he's able to run, play him. I mean, that's the whole thing. People are like, well, what if he gets more injured? Okay,
that's literally every game.
I was gonna say, so then you just don't play him at all. Like, hey, go play baseball, Kyler. Like, come on. But yeah, so Kyler's the big one. Obviously, DeAndre. I would give. I would argue more that I would try to give DeAndre time off
so that he can be dominant when he comes back.
If that hamstring is that bad, where he's just not able to even go and practice, like there's no reason to have that guy out there. It's not, it's different from years past. And DeAndre's talked about it. Like, does he want to be the first team all-pro receiver? Yeah, this dude is highly competitive. But at the same time, he's even mentioned, like, man, it's kind of nice. I don't have to do everything, right?
And he likes winning. He's in a room of receivers he respects. So if AJ is able to come back, and that's probably about the timeline, if he can get back this week, then you've got AJ and Kirk and Rondale Moore, and you feel confident that. I was less confident because it was Kirk and Moore and Antoine Wesley, but hey.
Right. But if you add... Yeah, and if you add AJ Green into the mix, Zach Ertz has played really well. Obviously James Conner's been an absolute
oh my goodness, yes,
star. That's more than enough, especially if Kyler Murray's going. But it's more than enough with Colt McCoy too. I mean, this is a very talented and deep team. Now, obviously, if DeAndre's at 90% and he's saying, and people might say, well, why would it be different for DeAndre than Kyler? And it's like, well, DeAndre literally has to sprint every single play. Kyler uses his legs, to make his game better. Whereas DeAndre, I mean, he has to run routes every play.
He has to run routes and be physical as well. So that's a different thing.
And he has to do, make sudden cuts and different movements and things like that. Like Kyler can play. We've seen Kyler can play from the pocket and be just fine.
Yeah.
Whereas DeAndre doesn't have that luxury. He's got to be able to make moves consistently if he wants to play. And so that's the thing is, if you don't feel like he's got it right now, just hold him out. Pugh's one, and I know this kind of goes into what you talked about earlier. Well, why don't you talk about who they signed today, I guess?
So they made a couple of roster moves. Cliff Kingsbury said on Monday that he's day-to-day, and Pugh's track record when it comes to day-to-day type injuries is that he'll miss practice a couple of days and then be either limited or full on Friday, and then he's good to go.
And then he plays on Sunday, yeah.
However, they made roster moves on Tuesday that make me suggest to me that they're not counting on either him or Max Garcia. In fact, I'm going to suggest that Max Garcia is probably going on injured reserve because they brought Danny Isidora, a guard, up to the active roster, and they signed Marcus Henry, a center, off the practice squad as well, to the roster. And with Justin Murray already designated to return, I'm anticipating he probably comes back this week. And so my guess, they're not counting on Pugh playing. They're planning on Max Garcia going on injured reserve. And then that way you have Justin Murray come back, potentially, with Josh Jones there. Sean Harlow plays left guard. And now you've got backups in either Jones or Murray, Isadora, Marcus Henry, who's going to be your backup center, to instead of making Harlow, because they don't need a center unless Harlow's playing. And that's what makes me think that Pugh's probably not playing, because they don't need a center if Max is hurt. And, well, if Max is healthy. If Max is healthy, they don't need a backup center. And if Max is hurt and Harlow's healthy and doesn't have to play, they don't need a backup center. So now they've got Marcus Henry on the line. So I anticipate probably, that's my guess, Max Garcia will probably end up injured reserve, and Justin Pugh probably won't play. Probably doesn't play this week. And so you get Harlow at left guard, Hudson at center, and then either Murray or Josh Jones at right guard this week.
Yeah, I'm interested to see who's the right guard. To your point, if it's going to be Murray or if they're going to have Jones do it. So that'll be something interesting to watch. But I would agree with you with the signing or the elevation of Isadora, the signing of Henry. I don't think either Garcia or Pugh are playing on Sunday.
Yeah, at running back, Chase Edmonds probably going to injured reserve. That's kind of the vibe that Ian Rappaport suggested. So James Conner and Eno Benjamin are the two healthy guys. Jonathan Ward's the key here. So if he clears concussion protocol, they've got three running backs on the roster that Cliff Kingsbury can trust to play a role in offense. Eno was really good in the row, and I think he actually is a perfect Chase Edmonds replacement in terms of skill set and ability. Chase, I think, is faster than Eno, but they're built kind of the same way. They do some of the same things in the way they run and can catch the ball. And so if Ward is fine, they still got Tavian Feaster on the practice squad. I don't think they need to go out and get anyone. If Jonathan Ward's not going to be available, well, then you're less comfortable about the depth beyond Connor and Benjamin, and you can bring up Tavian Feaster to be a third guy / special teams guy. And then I wouldn't rule out the idea. I know he's playing in the Canadian League. I don't know where they're at in the season. The DJ Foster would be the perfect guy to bring up in terms of playing special teams for a week or two.
Yeah, exactly. And so I don't expect them to make any serious moves with the running back position. I think you're gonna see Connor go from 40 to 50% of the snaps to probably 70% of the snaps, and then you'll probably see Eno and Ward split that last 30%. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Rondell Moore in the backfield a little bit more as well once the receivers get healthier.
Absolutely. Another roster move they added familiar face sort of Zach Kerr, and I think basically what that does is I think Josh Morrow, they'd already used up his standard elevations from the practice squad, so they were going to have to send to the roster, and based on 2019, they had Zach Kerr on their roster instead of Josh Morrow. Zach Kerr, who was on the 49ers, was cut over the weekend. I think they simply see him as a better option, especially since they lost Rashard Lawrence to injured reserve with the calf injury, and he can play nose tackle, and so it gives them two nose tackles on the roster with Corey Peters and now Zach Kerr. So that was the other roster move they made. There will be roster moves forthcoming. Aaron Brewer is the other guy that's I've got my eyes on because a long snapper is hard to replace. Sean Harlow, he filled in for the last punt of the game, gave a nice long snap to Andy Lee, but I don't know what they would have done in a field goal scenario or in a kicking scenario. They did bring in Hunter Bradley, who was cut by the Green Bay Packers. He spent like the last 8 years with the Packers. They brought him for a workout on Friday, and they brought in 3 long snappers on Tuesday. And so I would anticipate by the time you're listening to this, by the time this episode has actually gone live, that they will have signed a long snapper to the practice squad. And if Brewer's going to be out a couple of weeks, you might see him. I don't know if they'll try and carry him on the roster or put him on injured reserve. Luckily, if it's only 2 games, then what you're able to do is you're in a situation where, well, I guess if he only misses 2 games, then you've still got the bye. And so you could sign a long snapper to the practice squad, elevate him twice, and then you don't have to worry about it again because he'll be back after the bye.
Yeah, and that's probably what they're going to do with him.
Interesting thing. I should know this, but I didn't know this, that I thought the injured reserve was 3 weeks. It's 3 games. The bye week doesn't count anymore. I know it used to 8 weeks, and the bye counted when you used to be on the short term and you had to be on at least 8 weeks. But it's 3 actual games, so
yeah, because they don't want people playing that mess anymore, man. They don't want people taking advantage like the Cardinals would have.
Yes, they totally would have
with their long snapper.
Coming up next on the Rise of C-Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talk about. Let's look ahead to the Cardinals' next opponent, the Carolina-Panthers. That's coming up next on Rise of C-Red. We're back on the Rise of C-Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web, and Carolina-Panthers coming it down. They looked like something special to start the year, starting off 3-0. They're now 4-5. They've lost 5 out of the last 6 games. They've now lost Sam Darnold. He has a fractured scapula. Ian Rappaport called it an incomplete fracture, but based on the way he's been playing, I guess it's better than having an quote-unquote intercepted fracture because, he's been turning the ball over at high rates. That means P.J. Walker is going to start for the Panthers against the Cardinals, and Matt Barkley, whom they're going to sign, is going to be their backup. It looks like they lost Brian Burns, top pass rusher. Christian McCaffrey is back, but doesn't look like the cupboard is very big. They don't have J.C. Horn back. Stephon Gilmore didn't look all that good, so they've suffered some injuries on defense. And from what we see, the Cardinals are expected to handle this team handily, considering the opening line is 9.5 in terms of betting odds. The Cardinals, the line is they're 9.5 point favorites to start the week.
Yeah, this is a team that struggles offensively, just basically everywhere. Is McCaffrey back? I don't even remember.
He is. He played last game and wasn't much of a factor. 14 carries, 52 yards. But like we say, guess what? McCaffrey won't be a factor if the Cardinals get a lead. That's kind of what we've said all year.
Yeah, this team's 29th in passing yards, 31st in passing touchdowns, and 3rd in interceptions. But that's the bad third, not the good third. They throw the third most interceptions. Thank you, Sam Darnold. It does make you wonder, why did they make that trade, and why did they pick up the option? Yeah, and then they're 17th in rushing yards, but 26th in yards per carry, which is not great. Their defense isn't bad. I think they're
number 2 in yards. They're only allowing 293 yards a game, 20 points a game.
And I think they're number 1 in pass defense, if I remember correctly.
They are number 2 behind the Bills. They're allowing 181.4 yards. And if we look at the sack numbers, they're up there. They have 23 sacks tied for, so they're in like 8th place. They're 8th in the league in sacks. They don't have a large amount of interceptions, as they are tied with the Cardinals for 7 interceptions on the year. But, I mean, then you look at kind of what they do on downs. They are number 4 in third down defense, and which is, the Cardinals are number 2 in third down defense, and the Panthers are just behind their number 4. Well, basically one out of every 3. One out of every 3 that teams are doing. Panthers are also solid on fourth down defense. They've allowed 40%. The Cardinals are perfect on the year. And so you've got a team. Matt Rule kind of has Cliff Kingsbury's number. The Panthers have the Cardinals' number. They have not beaten the Panthers since, I believe, 2013, when that was the day when I think that was the first game when we had Darrell Washington and Carlos Dansby on the field at the same time.
Yeah, and you look at it, this is going to be a game where the Cardinals offense has to get out fast, and they have to be able to put distance between them and the Panthers. The Panthers offense is not a good offense in this NFL season. They've struggled mightily. PJ Walker is going to be the starting quarterback. He's okay.
He's a quarterback for my own heart because I'm a Houston Roughneck for life. from the
XFL,
the XFL, yes. So I latched onto that Houston team, and PJ Walker was fantastic there. Granted, NFL's completely different animal.
And he didn't play terrible last year. Was it last year that he played a little bit? I can't remember, but he wasn't awful. Whenever it was that he played in the NFL, he's just, he's a guy. Yeah, and it was last year. He started one game. He was in some games. He's a guy that is.
Well, do you want to look at the numbers? So he didn't start, but he got a significant playing time against the Giants and completed 3 of 14 passes against the Giants defense.
Yeah, and so he's just a guy that's, not, to your point, he's not translated to the league. And he was sacked 3 times. He moves well, but he's not a great runner, if that makes sense. He's a guy that turns the ball over quite a bit because he tries to do too much with the ball in his hands, and he's a guy that takes bad sacks. This is a game that the Cardinals should, I don't want to say this is equivalent to the Houston game because the Panthers defense is legitimate.
Yes,
they're
very good.
An outstanding defense. And so this, I'm thinking back, this is probably one of the top 2 defenses the Cardinals have played this season. Maybe them and the Rams. But we know that this team can go out and make plays against really good defenses. The problem is they've got to, like I said, get ahead. They cannot play chase with this team, not because I don't think that they can stop the Panthers offense, but because you don't want to get into a situation where Christian McCaffrey and Chuba Hubbard are able to really eat up clock, and they're able to, take the ball out of Walker's hands. That plays into the Panthers' strengths. The Cardinals are going to have to follow the same MO they followed against both the Rams and the 49ers last week, and what they did against the Tennessee Titans, and that's make the quarterbacks beat you. And if the quarterbacks, PJ Walker, if PJ Walker beats this team, that's one of those where you
stop
just
it. That's bad. It's bad.
It is. It's one of those where you just go, they had an off day. We've seen it. So, let's be honest. We saw it all this weekend. I have friends that text me. They're like, dude, I just won my Survivor.
How'd the Bills lose to the Jaguars?
I just won my Survivor poll because the Jags beat the Bills and the Cowboys lost to the Broncos. Those were the texts I got this weekend. And so any given Sunday is it is semi hyperbole, but there's some truth to it. And the Cardinals need to come out and they need to play like they're playing a great defense, because they are. They're playing a really good defense that can keep the Panthers in the game. There's a reason they've won 4 games on the season. But the Cardinals need to come out and show that they're not just a better team, but they're a superior team in every aspect of the game.
And the guy to watch, of course, is Hassan Reddick. He will be a player who is hungry to prove a point to the Cardinals. Although, I want to kind of pose this question because a lot of people said, well, why couldn't you just they could have cut Devon Kennard and re-signed Hassan Reddick, definitely, in terms of the money that he's making. But as nice as that might think that looks, let's take a look at what the move the Cardinals decided to go with instead, and that was to sign Marcus Golden for 2 years and $5 million. And Marcus Golden has 9 sacks. Hassan Reddick has 8.5. Now, Hassan's had a fantastic year, and I'm very interested because I wondered how he would translate in that defense. And what they actually have him doing, they have him listed as a 4-3 outside backer who mostly plays, he plays on the line as the end, line up against left tackle. So Hassan versus DJ, and this is where, hey DJ, do your thing, because he's done great things against
very good pass
rushers like Nick Bosa didn't have a sack again. So against Nick Bosa, DJ Humphries Nick Bosa's only had 1 sack in his career against the Cardinals so far since he entered the league. DJ's really good, and I know Hassan's going to be hungry, and they're probably going to move him around a little bit. But if he's lining up against DJ Humphries, I expect DJ to be better. I think DJ is a better left tackle than Hassan Reddick is pass rusher, but he does come with some relentlessness. He comes with athleticism, but he doesn't have the length. He doesn't have the length of a Chandler Jones, and he doesn't have the strength of a Marcus Golden.
Right, and that's the thing is, Reddick wins in a different way than a lot of pass rushers, and a lot of it is that his elite burst. And so one of the things that they're going to have to do is they're going to have to make sure, if Kyler is playing, that Kyler doesn't get too deep this week, that he's got to take the right
that's one thing Kyler is not great at. He does take really deep drops.
Right.
So, and I think part of that is to help him see down the field. But he would do his tackles a huge favor by not dropping so deep, because it allows DJ and Kelvin Beachum to just push their guys back.
Yeah, and so those are the things that you'll have to watch this week. That's honestly, if the Panthers win this game, it's 100% going to be because their defense just shut down the Cardinals' offense. And I don't want people to think that that's not plausible, because, again, one, we saw the Jaguars do that, and their defense is nowhere near as talented as the Panthers. The Jaguars did that to a phenomenal Bills offense. But two, the Panthers want to slow this game down. They want to make this a sloppy. They want this to be similar to what we saw the 49ers Cardinals first game was like, right? That's the ideal game for this Panthers team. And if they do that, if they dictate the pace and those things, they do have a chance to win this game.
Absolutely. Prediction, though. I wrote the preview for you for Sports Weekly. I have the Cardinals taking them down. I don't see any reason, unless they turn the ball over. Okay, that's obviously the case. I don't see any reason for the Cardinals offense to slow down. I see them, taking a lead early and kind of running away with it. It's going to be 31-21 in my mind. And I think 21 is even generous, because what we've seen from the Cardinals this year, they've got 6 games of over 30 points where they've scored, and they've got 7 games that over 30 points, and 7 games of 20 or fewer. And considering this Carolina offense, 21 points I think is
quite a bit.
It's quite a bit, but I think garbage time. I think you might see a garbage time touchdown.
Yeah, and I'm going to say it's a little bit less scoring until we find out the Kyler status. I'm going to go 24-10. The Cardinals win. Sounds
like a plan. So with that, hopefully, then we're talking about, and we should be talking about a 9-1 team next week. We will be back again with our next show. Of course, we're going weekly till probably the through the playoffs. But that'll wrap up this edition of the Rise Up Sea Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. We'll be back again next week, episode 333. Hopefully we've got a lot of good things to talk about as they will be getting ready to take on the Seattle Seahawks. So again, Seth Cox, Jess Root, thanks for listening. As always, we'll be back again next week.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up Sea Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red Sea Red, and of course, Rise Up Sea Red.